Some of that knowledge is applicable to smaller situations, serial entrepreneurs. Are you a serial entrepreneur? How should you structure your holdings? Hey there, Rob Thomson, Thomson Law Firm. During law school, I worked for a global Fortune 500 company in the legal department, specifically in the company's area. And myself and one senior paralegal were responsible for maintaining all of the subsidiary entities for the entire Western Hemisphere for that company. And it was a big job. There were hundreds of subsidiaries located all over the world and under our responsibility in the Western Hemisphere. And there was a room that was locked that had all of the records, all of the minute books, and the company records for all of those subsidiaries. And there were 3 people in the entire company that had the code to that room, and I was one of them. So as you can imagine, I learned quite a bit about companies and business organizations, business entities, how to manage them, how best to structure them for various purposes, how the big boys do it, if you will. Some of that knowledge is applicable to smaller situations, serial entrepreneurs. So I frequently speak with entrepreneurs who have multiple lines of business, multiple businesses that they're running. They get one business up and running, get it off the ground, and hand off the management to someone that they trust. You know, they hire a CEO or a COO for that business, and then they move on and build the next thing. And what I've found is that many times these serial entrepreneurs will have all of these companies set up and no real holding structure. So they own all of the businesses themselves or with their partners or what have you, and it's just it's a mess. It's an administrative nightmare, and it's a headache that is really unnecessary. So how should you structure that? If you're a serial entrepreneur and you've got multiple businesses and your administrative organization is sort of a mess, probably best to have an intermediate holding company between either you and your trust and the operating businesses. And the intermediate holding company should probably be an LLC, and I'll explain why. So with an LLC, you have superior asset protection. And by superior, I mean it's superior to that of a corporation. Corporations are legal entities the same as LLCs. They have limited liability, very much like an LLC. Slight differences there. The difference there is going to be with a corporation, your shares of stock in that corporation are considered personal property, and personal property is subject to seizure by your creditors. So if you have a personal liability, for example, an auto accident would be an example of a personal liability, and your liability insurance is not sufficient to cover the damages, then that creditor, that injured party may decide to come after you personally and seek compensation from out of your personal assets. And in that case, if that were to happen, then your shares of stock would be at risk. Whereas with a limited liability company, an LLC, your interests, your member interest in the LLC is not subject to seizure by creditors because at least in Texas and some other states, but I'm primarily talking about Texas because that's where I'm licensed, that's where I practice. In Texas, an LLC has what we call charging order protection. So with an LLC, with a member interest, the creditor wouldn't be able to seize or take your membership interest in that LLC. They would only be able to get a charging order against distributions from the LLC, which means if any money comes out to you from the LLC, then the creditor would be able to seize it. But they can't take the interest and liquidate the company. And that's called charging order only protection. Your subsidiary entities should also be LLCs for the same reason, and also because of the ease of management. Administrative burden is a lot lighter with an LLC than it is with a corporation. You don't have to have annual meetings. You don't have to elect a board of directors. Your directors don't have to appoint officers. So it's much more streamlined. And also you have the superior asset protection, liability protection with an LLC. And you also have your choice of tax treatment with an LLC. With a corporation, you can either be a C corporation or an S corporation. With an LLC, you can be a disregarded entity. So if your operating business is in an LLC and it's a disregarded entity, then that revenue, the income and expenses roll up onto the holding company's tax return. And so the holding company files a tax return for the income and expenses for all of the operating companies if they're all LLCs and they're all disregarded entities. Now those are tax matters. You should run that by your CPA before you do something like that, because there may be reasons to do something different. But for the purpose of keeping things simple administratively and tax efficient, that's usually a good way to structure things. So if you're a serial entrepreneur, consider streamlining your operations by having an intermediate holding company and structuring your operating companies as LLCs that are disregarded entities. If you enjoyed this video, I hope you'll like it, share it, and leave me a comment below. And if you have any questions, just feel free to reach out.